Okay. So normally this is a podcast about knitting and spinning, right? But I also do things like bake bread and eat it and other things. But this one is going to be about bread. So it's just like a supplemental thing, just like a, hey, let's hang out and make bread. I struggled. A lot of people have asked me to do bread episodes before, and I've really struggled with how to do that because it's always felt like I shouldn't do a tutorial because A, it's kind of not my style, but more importantly, it just feels really redundant because there are lots of great television shows, YouTube classes, craftsy classes about baking bread. Lots of great books about baking bread. So it just felt like that was redundant if I would try to do a tutorial. So what I try to do is just approach it as a much more casual endeavor. Like you were in the kitchen and we were talking about bread as I was making bread. And so that is the approach I have taken. I don't know. It just seemed like the thing that made the most sense. I did really think about it quite a lot, I promise. So you'll notice in this episode that, well, let me just talk about for one thing what we're doing. We're making whole wheat rolls. And I should have come equipped with the name of the person who did the recipe, but I will put that in a little hoopily-doo down there now. So it's a free recipe that you can get online. Okay. I did use my bread machine. Now some of you are gonna be like, dude, why did you make a bread talk and use a bread machine? There are a couple of reasons. A, it was what was working at the time because I was doing other stuff, and I actually really like to make dough in a bread machine. I don't bake usually in a bread, well actually I never bake in a bread machine. I just have not ever gotten results I really liked. And I'm okay with that. Like I do like to touch the dough and form the dough and, you know, have much more control over the baking of the dough. So I do often use the bread machine. It's very easy to know, okay, this dough is going to be done in 2 hours. It's going to need another hour to rise and an hour to bake. So it's easier to plan out my day because the bread machine is a controlled temperature environment. It's not going to take longer or less time to rise. So if you're doing other things and you're not really like in the moment with your dough, it's a great option. Also, it just seemed like too much information to do in one swoop of all of the stuff about dough and all of the stuff about shaping the rolls and all of the stuff about the ingredients. I talk a little bit about my grain grinder. So it was also just to kind of limit the amount of information I was vomiting at you. So when I said that this is like a casual episode about bread or a casual talk about bread, it doesn't mean that there's no information in it. I think there is quite a bit of good information in it. And I'm a human being. These are the things I think, but I do not have a PhD in bread sciences. Oh my gosh, though. I would totally get that PhD. Okay. But so I will easily stand corrected if I have given you information, poor information at any time. But I have not intentionally given you poor information at any time. But so there's that. And I think that's all. Oh, so if you're also like, dude, what about I'm going to do more, the bread machine thing. I'm going to do more episodes, and then the other episodes, I'll do more hand techniques. So I'll do some mixing in the KitchenAid mixture, like dough formation in the KitchenAid, because I have a stand, just a countertop, not a professional, but just a stand mixer. I should probably do one in a food processor, because some people have those that don't have those. I should remember to do that. If I forget, just let me know. And then I'll also just do some straight hand techniques. We'll do some like fermentation ones where you're not really kneading dough, although I will be honest with you, I don't have great success with those, so maybe I shouldn't do one of those for you, but maybe we'll do pizza or something that way. And we'll also do like an autolyse where you are letting the dough kind of soak really more than you are kneading it, which is a super helpful technique if you are doing handmade doughs, because it requires much less kneading than it would if you did not use that process. So it's A-U-T-O-L-Y-S-E. I don't even know really how to say it, but it seems like it's autolyse. So there's that. We're talking about bread. Okay. So please forgive my messy kitchen, but here's the first step. I'm gonna measure out the soft white winter wheat, which is different than the red winter wheat in that it has less tannins in it. It still has more protein than, for example, a spring wheat that, you know, either red or white. So it has enough proteins to do a bread with, but it has the less bitter taste that the tannins in the red wheat cause for some people. Not everybody really notices it or cares, or some people enjoy it. But usually if people are averse to whole wheat flavor, not just the texture, but the flavor, it's because of the tannins. And you can do things like add orange juice to your recipe, which will help soften those flavors. Or you can just use something like a soft white winter wheat. And you can buy this in commercial flour too. King Arthur makes one that you can find at a lot of grocery stores, or you can check a specialty grocery store like a Whole Foods or things like that. Okay, so here is the wheat in the grinder. I have a Victorio. You can either use it as a hand crank or as electric. You can get this like motor thing that goes in the back of it. And this is how I grind the wheat. It actually has variable settings, so you can adjust the coarseness. I generally just leave it on a pretty fine grind. And I apologize, I am handheld, so I apologize if I'm a little bit shaky. But this is going to be super loud, so turn your earbuds down. But I do want to show you how loud it is. So here you go. So this feeds down. There's an auger that drives it into the grinding mechanism. And then, yeah, out comes flour. It's super excited, right? So here is the finished flour. It took just about 13 minutes, maybe just a tiny bit more, to grind the 600 grams of the soft winter wheat berries. So I have no idea what other grain mills do. I'm sure some of them are much, much faster. But for us, when we only make bread probably once a week, sometimes not even that much, then this is plenty fast enough for us. Okay, so now we're going to see what I can do one-handed. So today is just a Thursday, and I have bags to sew in the other room. So we are using the bread machine. So you can totally make this by hand, and you can make it in the stand mixer, do all of the different things that you can always do. I tend to not ever bake in my bread machine, but boy, it is very convenient for doughs and pre-ferments, things like that. Just to keep them at a good steady pace. So, whatever, do what you want to do. This recipe calls for a half a cup of warm water and 3 eggs. And then it also calls for a cup of buttermilk. I never have buttermilk on hand, so here I'm just going to put the water and the eggs in here. I never do something fancy like this and pre-measure out. But I did not think I could crack the eggs single-handed. So... Oh, so anyway, so it calls for buttermilk, which I never keep on hand, but we do have this stuff usually in the fridge for biscuits and whatnot, and it's basically just like you can get like non-fat milk powder. It's just that, but with buttermilk. So the ingredients are sweet cream, churned buttermilk, sweet dairy whey, and lactic acid. So lactic acid is the only kind of what's that called? You know what I mean. Preservative. There we go. Okay, so that's what I use. But I'll use that. I add that with the dry ingredients because obviously it's dry. And what you do is you just add the equal amount of water. So it called for 1 cup of buttermilk. So I used 1.5 cups of water because I had a half cup of water in the recipe as well. And then I'll add a 1/4 cup of this, which is just on the directions on the back of the jar. And then it requires... Did we just do something crazy? Sorry kids, I don't know what happened. And so then it requires 80 grams of honey. I like everything, I don't like recipes where, sorry, I gotta tear my scale because it got angry. I like recipes where everything is given in weight, because one thing that's, if you do decide to start grinding your own flour, you cannot measure it by volume. It just does not want to have anything to do with that, because it's so much fluffier than your store-bought flour. What do you need, honey? You're not being very stealthy. Okay, so there's that. So that is all of the liquidy stuff except for butter. Now it actually calls for a half a cup of butter, but I don't have a half a cup of butter softened right now, so we're just gonna single-handedly, yes. It's like almost a cup of butter. Half a cup of butter, excuse me. So there's that. Okay, so now we're gonna add the flour. Oh, just ran out of battery. Really? What happened? So now we're gonna add the flour. The recipe calls for 563 to 625, and I ground 600. So we'll start with 563. We'll put it in the bread machine at 563, and then we will add any extra that we might need later. There we go. And I will also add the buttermilk powder at this time, which I am not scientifically measuring at all because I'm trying to do it one-handed. But that's that. The recipe then calls for a tablespoon of wheat gluten. So there's that. And then 1.5 teaspoons of salt, which I will have to add after I turn off the camera because that is one thing I forgot to bring over here. And the reason it has extra gluten in it, even though this is not like low protein flour or anything like that, is just that the hull that's left, like the bran that's left on the whole wheat flour, can cut the proteins that make the bread strong enough to rise. And so the extra gluten just gives it extra strength so that if some strands are cut, it'll make up for it. Does that make sense? You can also use it with low protein flours. Lots of times people use it in bread machine recipes just because those old school bread machines had like that vertical rise, like they were a tube. So if you're making just the dough and you're gonna, you don't necessarily need that. But if you do want to make a whole wheat bread, it's one of the ways to get it to rise a little bit better. And then, so I'll add the salt. So the other thing I need is 2 teaspoons of yeast. Old school folks, you had to proof this. I don't ever proof my yeast. I know it's good. One thing I do is buy yeast in bulk and store it in a refrigerator in a mason jar because these little packets of yeast get really expensive after a while. They're kind of crazily expensive. And that is that. So yeah, I'll add the salt. I'll put this in a dough cycle, and then I'll come back and shape it and let it rise again. I think that's all. That doesn't seem very fancy, but that's me. All right, I'll touch you later. Okay, so I messed up and smushed the bread before I got you on the video, but here is the dough after the cycle is complete. And I have just, lots of times I don't throw any flour down, but this dough, this is the first time I've actually made this bread. I've never made whole wheat, 100% whole wheat rolls before. I've only done them with white flour, so we're experimenting together, okay? And then, so I don't always put flour down, but it's pretty wet, so I'm gonna go ahead and give it a little bit just so. Sorry, I'm not very good at like holding the camera and doing things. Let me see if I should widen back a little bit, but not get flour on the camera. Not completely successful. But anyway, so there's the dough. And then what normally I would do is scale this whole thing and then divide it by 12 or whatever you want to do. And by scale, I mean I would weigh the whole thing and divide it by whatever. But as I said, this dough is a little wet. I guess I should just do it. We'll be responsible human beings. And we will do the correct thing, okay? Okay. So it's 1,300 grams, essentially. Now the exciting thing, oh, I do have a calculatory phone thing nearby. Let's touch everything with flour, shall we? So 1,300 grams, and actually it won't be 12, I don't know what I was thinking. Probably like 15? Maybe 18? She does 6 by 4, 24, but that seems a little tiny. Let's do whatever, it doesn't matter. Let's do 18. What did I say it weighed? Oh, you guys. Well, see, there's another timer going off. I might have stew in the oven. How much was it again? 1,300. Jeez, guys. Tell me these things. So 1,300 divided by 18. Oh, clear. Is 162.5. So we're looking at about 160-ish grams for our rolls. So if you don't have a bench knife, you don't need to have a bench knife. But they are kind of a handy little thing. Especially when you are done with your dough on your counter. You're probably more responsible than I am, and you probably don't totally mess up your own counter, but wait, if it's 1,300 and I'm dividing by 18, it can't be 162. Can it? That's what I thought. 1,300 divided by, what did I divide by? 8 or something? Okay, 72. It's like, these rolls are gigantic. Whoa. Okay. So, again, you would not normally want to add this much flour to your dough because that is wackadoodle. But this is pretty wet. And since I'm trying to do everything one-handed, let's not be insane. Okay? Okay. So anyway, so I'm just going to scale these all. That's way too bad. Yo. I used to be so super efficient at this. It was out of control. Like when I worked at the bakery, I could just be like, pow, 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 pow. Barely even had to weigh them. And we didn't have like digital scales. We had balance scales. So you had to throw the dough on a thing with a metal balance. And you could just tell by how fast it was starting to drop, whether it was, you didn't have time to wait till it actually dropped. Like, let's not be crazy. But you could tell, you could tell by how fast it dropped, whether you had the right amount or not. But I'm scaling these really tiny. It's your fault, you guys. You're messing me up. The nerve. And it's not, I mean, like, you're not talking about needing to be insanely precise here. Like, I usually set a range for myself, like, I will accept dough within the weights of 65 to 75 grams. And then I even usually give myself a little room. Oh my gosh, really though. On top of that, can you tell it's getting darker? It's getting so windy.
Now, I will probably have to put you down because I don't think I can shape with you in my hand. Maybe if I were bigger I could, but I don't know if I can do it with you when they're this small. And I got a little heavy handed with the flour, people. I definitely got a little heavy handed with flour. Whatever. Life goes on and stuff. Okay, so 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Alright, well maybe I didn't count right. I just kind of have a feel.
So all you do is, I guess I should do it on the, here, I'll do it with this one. all you do is you want to look for the dough to, like, see how this is cut here and it's like kind of porousy? But when I turn it over, it's a little smoother. See that? See, we want to work to try to get that smoother stuff on the outside of our roll. And the reason is, it's not just because it's more attractive, but because the surface, getting a smooth surface, will give it a better rise. So again, you would kind of use 2 hands to do this, but you can also, I'm just pressing kind of at an angle. I'm just kind of rolling the dough underneath of itself. You can also do them like this, whoop, whoop. Doesn't matter, fine either way. And again, if they're a little sticky, just dump them in just a tiniest bit of flour. Too much and they won't want to seam up on themselves. Oh, and I'm just putting these in a 9 by 13. Sorry, keep like. Oh, by the way, can you see my crazy scar from the yogurt making incident? Now, if I were doing this on my own, I would have started with the ones over there that I scaled first, but I'm not paying as close attention as I should. Just a little bit of rest helps them to do what they need to do a little bit better. And you want to try to, you can see on some of these I just did not do a very good job. The fewer pieces you can have, see, I'm going to have to cheat on this one. The fewer pieces you have in your roll, so the least little chunks you have to add or take away, the easier it's going to be to form, because it's going to be more cohesive. You've not chopped up gluten and all that good stuff. Oh, see? Come on, work with me. And it's okay if you put these in the pan, if they touch, if they don't touch, whatever. Obviously, if they don't touch, they probably will. They probably will after you get them to rise, even if they don't when you put them in there. But if they don't, the only thing that'll happen is you'll get crust on the sides instead of just on the top. So... Oh, and see, here we go. So I just put this guy in, and he's got a seam right there, and I'm just going to take him out, and because again, those seams are going to want to split open. It's not such a big deal when you're doing rolls, but because they don't have to, they don't need as much structural integrity to rise as like a full loaf of bread does, because obviously their surface to interior ratio is much different, but still. Oh, and so if you like long rolls versus round rolls, then you can form them like tiny loaves of bread. I wonder if I could do this. The computer does, or the camera doesn't like it when I change its orientation very much. Okay, so I'm just gonna, see, I'm just gonna like roll it back towards myself. You're just creating that surface tension. And there you go, you got like a little happy roll. Swink. Ta-da! Which looks like that. Ta-da! So anyway, so there they are in the pan. See, they're not perfect. They're wonky. But when they rise, they'll be happy to do, and they will look nice. So, I'm just going to spray them with cooking spray. You don't have to. Actually, usually what I do is spray the plastic wrap. I just keep, well, I'll do plastic wrap for this. You don't need to see my like grubby sheet of plastic I reuse every time. And we'll put that on. We'll let them rise until they're good, and then they're ready to bake. Okay, so ta-da! There's the rolls. And they've been rising for probably an hour and 10 minutes. My kitchen is not always the warmest, and I kind of forgot and had them sitting up against our window sill. Whatever. So, one way you can tell if they're ready is when you push them down like that. If they stay, they're probably ready to go in the oven. And if it pops back up, they need a little bit more time to rise. So, I'm going to put these in the oven. They're supposed to bake at 350 for 13 to 25 minutes. And we'll go from there. They are very smooshy, by the way. This dough is crazy. It's very spongy. So, I don't know. We'll see how they do. Okay, so here we go. They may have needed a little bit more time in the oven. This one's a little bit light. Let me see the temperature on these guys. If you're ever not sure about your doneness, you can check temperature. Yeah, these should be fine. Anything in 190. For rolls that are going to cool off pretty quickly, you kind of maybe want to hit 200. Some people say 210, whatever. But basically what it is you're trying to get them to a temperature where water evaporates, so it's driving the moisture out of them. And that's what you're looking for. So, this one looks a little sad. But we'll see how they do. Maybe should I try to get one out of there? That seems like a folly since they just came out of the oven, but... Wow. Okay. But yeah, they look like they're pretty good. They look very smooshy. They're nice and floofy. They've got some substance to them. I think they're gonna be good. So yeah, those are the bread I make. I'm actually pretty happy with that recipe overall. I do think it needs more flour than is stated in the recipe. I don't know. It could just be the difference in humidity, like maybe she's at a different altitude. I don't know, but I consistently do need to add at least a 1/4 cup of flour to the dough to get it to be manageable. And I'm pretty efficient at working with wet doughs, so wet doughs don't usually freak me out or anything, but it just seems very wet. And I think also that affects the crumb overall. So, and I don't actually know a lot about that, so I won't go into it, but that's my gut feeling, is that when the dough is too wet, that if you don't get like that super awesome open hearth bread, because you're not using those techniques, then I think when your dough is a little too wet, it can feel a little stodgy in the final dough. But that's just like my gut feeling. That's my intuition telling you that. That's not real information. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll probably put a Ravelry link, like a Ravelry thing there on the Ravelry boards if you want to check, because that's like the easiest place to talk about stuff. And if you'd like to see more of them, let me know. If you're like, dude, this was the most obnoxious 15 minutes you ever held me captive for. If nobody else has said it, maybe you should say it. But please, 9,000 of you, don't say that, because it might hurt me. I'll just admit it. It might hurt my feelings. But like, if 7 of you say it, then I'll just know that there are 9,000 of you. I just don't want to hear it over and over again. Does that make sense? Just myself. But anyway, I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk next time. Bye.